Hey, welcome to another episode of CultureCast with host Dustin Homan. Dustin Homan is a 4-H extension educator with Purdue University, and he's going to be talking with Alice Sweeney about her trip to the Netherlands. So stay tuned. Welcome to another episode of CultureCast with host Dustin Homan. Dustin Homan is a 4-H extension educator with Purdue University. Dustin, it's always a pleasure talking with you. You bring in a variety of different individuals who have been all parts of the world and have been very active in the 4-H program.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. And it's good to see you again. I want to acknowledge that this is a very special culture cast for me for two reasons. One being that we are recording this during National 4-H Week. So I'm excited to bring in a 4-H alum and someone who's currently very active with our 4-H program where I am here in Marion County, the county where Indianapolis is, this capital of the state of Indiana. The second reason I'm excited about this is, Patrick, we talk about all these countries and how big of a world is. It's also a very small world. And I come to find out that my guest today is actually related to me through marriage to my wife when I first got here. So a lesson for everyone, always be careful what you say until you fully know a person. So anyway, I'm really excited to introduce Alice Sweeney. Alice is the director of our 4-H programs in Wayne Township, the western part of Marion County. So Alice, welcome. Will you tell our CultureCast viewers a little bit about yourself?
Well, as you said, my name is Alice Sweeney. I grew up in central Indiana, was the 10-year 4-H'er in Johnson County. I did not grow up on a farm, but I grew up in a rural area, and my mother got my siblings and I involved in 4-H as a way for us to meet other young people. And it became a real family tradition. I was in 4-H for 10 years, and this was in the 1970s. And my last year in 4-H, after my first year at Purdue University, I was part of the International 4-H Youth Exchange Program. We call it IFE, and that is when I traveled to the Netherlands as a part of a group of 13 young people from around the United States that did this exchange with different families and organizations in the Netherlands.
Thank you, Alice. And we're going to dive right into some of Alice's beautiful pictures from her trip to the Netherlands. And I know I've mentioned this before, but 4-H is present in over 50 countries around the world. And so it's always exciting when we're able to make those connections on CultureCast. So as we always do at CultureCast, we start off with two slides. One is the flag of the country that we're going to be talking about, and this is the flag of the country of the Netherlands. So next summer, 2021, hopefully, when the Olympic Games are taking place in Tokyo, when you see this flag, you'll know that it is from the country of the Netherlands. And where is this place on the map? Well, you'll see here we have a zoomed out shot of the continent of Europe, and the red spot that you see there is the country of the Netherlands. So Alice, I need your help here. When we first talked about this, I remember calling the country Holland, and also we've heard people refer to it as the Dutch people. Can you kind of help us understand what is the difference between these three terms that are used?
Well, just like the United States is made up of 50 states, the Netherlands is made up of multiple provinces. One of them is South Holland, one of them is North Holland, and it's kind of just a name that people use, but the more correct name is the Netherlands. So nether, meaning under, or you think of the nether world as the underworld. The Netherlands is a country made up primarily of land that has been reclaimed from the sea. So hence that name. The Dutch, the language is Dutch, the people are the Dutch. Don't know quite why. That's just, if you look at that, the country just to the north sticking up right there, that's Denmark. And the people from Denmark are the Danish. So they're not the Danish, they're the Danish. I'm not sure why. It probably has to do with the native language and the pronunciation of it as part of their native language. So the Netherlands speak the Dutch language, which is a Germanic language, very much like German, with a lot of throaty sounds in it. So.
And I did just a quick Google search, and it has a really interesting and robust and long history. So for our history buffs out there, I encourage you to look at that on your own time. But let's delve into your photos, Alice. You mentioned this a little bit earlier about what took you to the Netherlands, but tell us a little bit more about the connection between 4-H and IFI and how you got there.
Well, I'm number 5 of 6 children in my family, so I followed my older siblings into 4-H, but I've always wanted to travel. And as a child of a large family, traveling wasn't something we did a lot. And when I was in high school, I had the opportunity to go with my high school Spanish class to Mexico. And it just kind of started my love for wanting to go see the world. I always loved history and geography too, so that kind of put that in there. My freshman year in college, I found out about the IFI program and applied to it before I even told my parents I was going to do it. And you got to remember, this was back in the 70s. This was before we had the internet and cell phones and easy communication. And I think my mom was just concerned about her 18-year-old daughter going halfway across the world and not being able to know how I was. And years later, in a conversation I had with her, she told me how much she worried about me when I was gone. And I was having such a good time that I didn't always do a great job of writing home. I tried to write a letter a week, but they didn't get there very quickly. So she had a few weeks where she hadn't heard from me at all. So nowadays it's much easier to
Yeah, but like you said, that was a good thing because that meant you were having a lot of fun. Tell the
I
viewers
was having a great time.
IFI stand for?
International 4-H Youth Exchange. So this is, in Indiana, we had a very active IFI organization and an IFI alumni group and a state coordinator for the international programs at the time. The year that I went from Indiana, there were several other students or former 4-Hers who went either on a summer program like I did, or we had someone who'd already graduated from college that did a 6 to 8 month experience. So this is me. Oh yeah.
So that group you were just talking about. So tell us about the group and then the connection with the youth in the Netherlands.
Okay, so I was part of a group of 13 4-Hers from around the United States. And in this photo, those of us that are Americans are in the yellow t-shirts. There were kids from Maine, Indiana, Illinois, Arizona, Washington, Iowa, so Arkansas, all over the United States. And the young people in the blue shirts are from our first host families in a village called Hanslersdijk in the province of South Holland. They were a wonderful young group of people. We had an absolutely fabulous time for the 2 weeks that we stayed with them.
So it's interesting being a part of this program. You not only got to meet 4-H members from across the U.S., but then you as a group made international connections as well.
Absolutely.
Are you in touch with any of these people still?
Yes, I am. A few of them. This is the beauty of Facebook that allows you to reconnect with old friends. So my counterpart from Maine is the guy in the front row that's looking at the other, looking at that's Bruce. Okay. He lives in Maine. And then our group leader is on the far left, dark hair. She is a retired extension educator from Minnesota, and I still keep in touch with her.
That's wonderful. Well, let's get into a little bit about what this experience was like for you. So tell us, you're there for multiple days. Where are you staying? Who are you interacting with?
So my first host family was in a village called Hanslersdijk, south of The Hague. The Netherlands is an interesting country because Amsterdam is the capital city, but The Hague is the governmental capital. And this is just south of The Hague, very close to the North Sea, just a few miles from the ocean here, or from the North Sea. But my first host family, Krista in the red, was about the same age as me. She was my host sister, and then the younger sister, whose name I actually cannot remember, but she was adorable. The puppet she has is one that I made and took with me as a gift, so she was loving that. My host parents were absolutely wonderful. He owned a heating and cooling business, and this area of the Netherlands was known for, this is their home, and was known for the glass houses or the greenhouses where they grew flowers. So he actually had quite a successful business in doing the heating and cooling in these glass houses.
And what are they growing in here, Alice?
They're growing flowers. You know, that's what the Netherlands is grown for. A lot of carnations. They did take us on a tour of the glass house. So here is the carnations growing in one of the glass houses in Hanslorsdijk.
Do they use year round?
Yes, year round. You know, and that's the beauty of growing them in a greenhouse or a glass house, that they can control the temperature and the growing conditions. So just like our growers do here in the United States. So this Hanslorsdijk is also the home to the second largest flower market in the world. The largest flower market is in Alsmeer, which is a town north of Hanslorsdijk, north of Amsterdam. But here is the flower auction. So these are all boxes of carnations that they're getting ready to auction off.
And
this
about the process for that.
And you're really testing my memory there, but I just know that this is a picture of the clock and how it actually works. I don't remember. I know they have a certain time. The flowers go by in a conveyor belt, and the buyers are sitting up on the left, like almost like a classroom with tiered desks, and they are placing their bids as the flowers go by. So
is this that conveyor belt right here?
Yes, it is.
That's incredible. I mean, I think we're
just flowers everywhere.
A lot of us are used to livestock auctions
Yes.
You know, if we taking animals to the fair through 4-H or FFA, but I guess I'm picturing that same environment and just flowers going by.
And it's, you know, I don't remember an auctioneer like you would get at a livestock auction, which to me is the entertaining part of a livestock auction is the auctioneer. But these, this was much more, even 40 years ago, was much more mechanized. It was very efficient. And these are buyers that are shipping all around the world. So, yeah. So, okay, so in the yellow jacket is Kelly. She was one of the 4-H'ers in my group. She was from Arizona. And to the right is Krista, our host sister. But this is on a visit to Madurodam. Madurodam is it is a miniature replication of the Netherlands. It's a very popular place for visitors to visit because you notice the villages and the towns are all laid out in miniature. And it was quite a fascinating place to visit. I really enjoyed the day that we went to Madurodam. There's some flowers. These are in the flower auction again, but every village.
Carnations?
They're either carnations or mums. I think they're carnations. Every village, every market has flowers for sale. You walk down streets in Amsterdam, The Hague, there's flowers everywhere. They're not expensive there. And every home has flowers in it. So I think that my time in the Netherlands really got me to be a flower lover. And I now have a pretty extensive flower garden of my own. And I think all that came from my time there and really learning to appreciate the beauty of nature that we get in flowers. One of the most famous flower gardens in the whole world is near Amsterdam in the Netherlands called Keukenhof Gardens, where they grow millions of tulips and hyacinths and bulbs every year. Now, we were there in June and July. Keukenhof is only open for 6 to 8 weeks every year, and that's in the spring when the bulbs are blooming. Wow. That's on my bucket list, is to go to Keukenhof sometime.
Well, I've learned something from you talking about other flowers and carnations, because I have always had an image of tulips in my mind when people talk about the Netherlands, but
Mhm.
you know, from what you've told us, it's not the only flower that they're growing.
Well, and you notice in the glass houses, they were growing carnations. The tulips, they
Mhm.
grow out in the fields. So,
Interesting.
yeah, I don't know if they grow many tulips in the glass houses. That would be something to look up, but um, really beautiful. You know, the glass houses were just full of all kinds of flowers.
Mm.
And you know, the Netherlands sells flowers all around the world.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, it's funny you say that. My aunt works at Grand Cayman, the islands, which is just south of Cuba. And Alice, she's said multiple times that she'll get shipments in and it'll say, you know, ship from the Netherlands or
mhm.
the Netherlands. So you're right. It's amazing how they can get these all around the world.
Yeah.
Tell us about your second host family that you stayed with.
So my second host family was in the province of Gelderland, which is in southern south central Netherlands. They were farmers. They were sugar beet farmers. An absolutely wonderful family. Very, very family oriented, very hard workers. The one memory I have of them was eating breakfast with them. Because we ran out of bread at breakfast. So my host sister Gertie just went next door to the bakery and bought another loaf.
Probably freshly baked and still warm, right?
Oh, it was. The other
Oh.
thing I remember, and I don't know if you want to include this or not, when I first went to their home, the first time I went into the bathroom, I couldn't figure out how to flush the toilet. And it took me about 20 minutes because, you know, in America, we have a handle where you flush it. There, they had a pipe that went from the tank to the ceiling, and you pulled down on part of the pipe.
Really?
Yeah, it took me forever. I was way too embarrassed to ask.
Is it so like the tank on the back of a toilet that we have here? Are you saying like
Yeah.
that was up in the air?
There was a pipe that went from the back of the tank up into the ceiling.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
No, I'm glad you shared that because it's those little things that, I mean, you know, those are all bodily processes for every human in every part of the world, but we all engineer and think of solutions a little bit differently. So I'm glad you
Yeah.
shared that. I also wanted to point out, one of the first things I saw in this photo was that John Deere hat.
Yeah.
Obviously, we use those all over the U.S., so it's nice to see that connection that
Yeah.
they're using machinery that we use here as well. I was kind of interested. This building looks very old. Like if you look at the roof.
That was their barn. So brick and with a
Okay.
thatched roof. The thatched roofs were quite common, like you would in other parts of, you know, if you've been to England or,
Uh-huh.
you know, other countries in that northern part of Europe, you have a lot of thatched roofs.
Do you know if they would build a new barn there today, would they put a thatched roof on it?
I do not know, but
Huh.
it must be a common enough material that
Mhm.
holds up to their winters because, you know, the Netherlands is at a higher latitude than we are, so it's much colder in the winter. A lot of people, you know, synonymous with the Dutch is ice skating because they really do ice skate down the canals, and they have a lot of. If you watch the Winter Olympics, you always have Dutch skaters who are, especially speed skaters, that are at the top of their game. So it does get
Yeah.
very cold there in the winter, and they
Which
have a
makes,
lot.
as you said, I mean, that's just something that they normally do, right? They're
Yeah, yeah,
skating in
yeah.
normal life.
So as I mentioned, my family were sugar beet farmers. So this is us. I'm helping them hoe sugar beets here. And my family always got a big chuckle out of this photograph because I was not always the most willing gardener at that point in my life. So to see me out hoeing sugar beets. So I'm the one in the yellow shirt, the tall one, and in the middle is my host father.
Yeah, I've
So,
always, you know, I've found like doing dishes at someone else's house is always more fun than yours. So I can relate, right? It's much more fun
yeah,
to garden somewhere else. Plus, these are sugar beets. We don't normally grow those things
no,
in
no,
gardens. So,
not in Indiana. We don't, or
no.
Ohio, or there are sugar beet farms. I think down in Louisiana.
Mm.
So this is in Amsterdam, the capital
Mm.
city, and there really are canals everywhere. And a great way to see Amsterdam is through the canal boat tour.
Beautiful.
So if anyone ever goes to Amsterdam, I would highly recommend, one of the first things you do is take the canal boat tour, because it's a great way to see the city. Amsterdam's a lovely city.
It's beautiful. Now, you mentioned earlier that they would skate on the canals. So would it
Yes,
be a place that would freeze over and people would just be skating on it?
yes, in the winter.
Wow.
Mhm. And you know, it's true that they have a lot of, you know, the parking. This canal is kind of, you kind of step down into it, but a lot of them are right at street level. So the cars park at an angle, and there are a lot of cars that end up in the canal. So that's a real problem, because especially if they've had a little too much to drink, a little too much Heineken, whatever, and their cars go in the canal. That's
I'm
pretty
sure it makes
frequent.
for an interesting job as a tow truck driver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, bicycles really are the way to get around there too. We rode bikes a lot. And I remember going, the legal drinking age there was 18. So most of us were over 18, but we would go to the pubs with our host brothers and sisters and ride our bikes. And then you had to not drink too much because you had to ride your bike home. This is Jeanette. She was my third host sister, and she lived in the province of Groningen, spelled Groningen. Groningen is how they pronounced it. And her family were farmers, dairy farmers, and what I thought was so unique about this family was that their house and their barn were connected to each other. So I think you have a picture of that, Dustin. Yeah, this is their home. So on the left is the house, on the right is the barn, and they would bring the cows in. And a lot of that had to do because of, you know, this is, again, the farthest northern province. It got really cold in the winter, and that just conserved the heat if they were connected to each other. So
I hadn't thought about that.
yeah, the other thing that I have a real memory of this family, and we did this in all my families, but in this one I specifically remember it because Jeanette's older brothers and her father were farmers, but they would all stop their work day at about 9 or 9:30 every morning and come in and have coffee. And they would sit around the table, drink coffee, have a sweet pastry or something, and they'd talk for a half an hour. But it never failed. It was every day they would stop for their coffee time. So they might be up at 5:30 or 6 in the morning to milk their cows, but they would stop for coffee, and they would do it as a family.
Speaking of that, Alice, do you remember any of the food that you ate, and especially, you know, different types of food that you wouldn't find in the U.S.?
Well, you know, I mentioned the bread. The bread there was awesome, and our breakfast was usually a slice or two of bread with butter and then some kind of topping, either very finely shaved cheese, or I don't remember ever having eggs for breakfast, but, you know, my 18-year-old self loved the bread topping that they called hagelslag, and hagelslag was basically chocolate sprinkles. So it was almost like having a donut, but it was fresh bread with butter and chocolate sprinkled on top. The Dutch chocolate is awesome. Their cheese is awesome too. So when we were in this last host family, we visited a cheese factory. And so probably the two most common cheeses that you would know are Edam and Gouda, but of course there they pronounce it Gouda. But the cheese is sliced very thin with a cheese slicer and topped on your bread. And often they'd have a meal like that for lunch too, sometimes with meat on it. So yeah, that's what I remember about the food. Well, of course, their beer was very good. Heineken, and Heineken is the national beer of the Netherlands. And there's another Dutch beer called Grolsch. And even though I grew up in a family of German origins, I never particularly cared for it till I went there. So always served in small glasses. So, yeah. So these are,
and you're just talking about cheese, so to make the connection between where that comes from for some of our viewers, were these cows at your third?
This was at my host family. And you know, so the other northern province of the Netherlands is Friesland, Friesland. Iesland. And Frisian cows are a breed of dairy cows, if you're familiar with, that's where they come from.
Is that what these are?
No, the Frisians are black and white.
Okay.
Like a Holstein, but
I
they're
want
black and white.
to, when I've been to a dairy here in the U.S., it's very mechanized. Did you see that? And were they using machines to milk the cows as well?
Well, this is 1979, so I don't remember.
That's okay.
Probably they were using some kind of automated, they weren't doing it all by hand, but not to the point where they are today in automating their milking process.
So for our viewers, here's the barn where it starts, the animals that convert, a miraculous process of them converting forage into this delicious delicacy that Alice just told us about. So, and then obviously from the processing plant to market, right? Is this just a...
Right.
Wow.
This is a very typical in any village. You'd have a cheese shop like this. So they often, the Dutch cheese is often rounder, those big ovals like that.
Interesting.
So covered in wax.
Well, Alice, as our time winds down, I always like to ask one final question, and I think it's a beautiful photo to end on as well. Alice, tell our viewers, why should they visit the Netherlands?
Well, it's an absolutely beautiful country. It's very different than the United States. It's very flat. Remember the technology and the engineering and the willpower of the Dutch people to reclaim this land from the sea. But it's also just a very hospitable country. English is widely spoken, so for Americans who are not always great at language, it's an easy place to be able to communicate. And it's just the history, the Dutch people have been very prosperous through the centuries in their trading around the world, the East India, the Dutch East India and Dutch West India companies. So it just is really a wonderful, easy place to visit. Beautiful, green, and easy to get around, and not very small. Not very big. So it's easy to get around.
Dustin, another country that's on my bucket list, it sounds like the Netherlands. It's just a fantastic experience that Alice had.
Absolutely.
And I can tell you that having this experience as an 18-year-old was very life-changing. And I encourage my own children to do some kind of study abroad, because when you just get a different worldview when you spend time in another country.
I would say so. Again, we're talking with Alice Sweeney. Alice Sweeney is the Wayne Township, Marion County 4-H Director, and our host, Dustin Homan. Dustin Homan is the 4-H Extension Educator with the Purdue University. Dustin, again, I'm just thrilled with your program.
Thanks, Patrick. And I want to thank you and Sarah for hosting us. Most of all, Alice, thank you for your time. And to our viewers, I hope you'll tune in again for another episode where we explore this big, wonderful, beautiful world that we live in. Take care.